In this video I'll be showing you how to create titles in Adobe Premiere Elements and do different effects with them. To start off, I'll just create a simple title, clicking the T icon underneath the preview window. That opens up the title editor. The default text is put there to show you that you add text in there. I'll just type in the title, the movie title. Using different tools, you can adjust the size of text. You can adjust different styles. There's some preset styles. You can adjust the color and other things. These two buttons here adjust the alignment so that you can align it in the center vertically or horizontally. When you're done with your title, you can press done, and then you'll see that the title is now in your resource panel, as well as it's placed in your timeline wherever your cursor was. The default length of any still image or title placed inside Premiere Elements is 5 seconds. You can increase the length of it simply by hovering over the end of it, and you'll see this red bracket with an arrow on it, and then you can click and drag, and that'll show you adjusting the time. If I want to make it 10 seconds long, I can go out to the 10-second marker, or shorter, and vice versa. And you can adjust the length, the overall length of the title. The next thing I'll show is how to add some effects with motion and changing size and other things. We'll take this title that I've made and have it zoom in and get larger on the screen from a small point. To adjust things like the animation of the text, or to add animation, we need to get into the properties of whatever we're working with. So with the title selected as it is here, I'm going to choose this small box that is the properties dialog, and it'll change the panel over here to show the properties of this specific object. It gives the name of what it is. It was just called Title 2. It's 10 seconds. It's a still image. There's two default things that can be edited, the motion and the opacity. Motion is going to be position, scale, rotation, and opacity will be how see-through it is. If I click on the opacity, if I would slide that all the way down to 0, it would disappear, but in essence it's just made see-through so the background can be seen. If we go to halfway, it seems sort of dim because it is halfway transparent, or 100% it's all the way opaque, so it can't be see-through. This is a way in which you can adjust something to fade in and fade out. In fact, those are two presets there. If I would click on that, fade in, and then fade out, and then play it back, we'll see it fade in at the beginning, and as the cursor goes along, you can see this yellow line here. This line shows opacity. When it gets to there, it'll fade out. That yellow line is an indicator of opacity on a still image like that. And you can notice there that these little diamonds. Those diamonds are indicators of where an effect will change, and they're referred to as keyframes. You can make keyframes visible for a clip in the Properties view by clicking on this little stopwatch with arrows. It says Show Keyframes, and that will then bring up this Keyframes Timeline. And this is a timeline that just shows the length of the individual clip that we have selected, or the asset we have selected. And you can move the cursor along here, and you can see that there are these small little diamonds, and those reflect where a change is set to happen for an effect. So in this instance, for opacity, and we can use these little arrows here to adjust, to hop between the keyframes. It'll start at 0% or 100% opaque, or 100% see-through, and then at this point it will become 100% opaque, so that it will fade in, and it will stay 100% opaque until this point, where it will taper out to a 0% opacity. Keyframes are also used then for adjusting things like motion. Just so we can see that, instead of this, I'm going to click on this eyeball in front of opacity, which will hide the opacity effect. It's still actually saved, but we can't see it anymore because I turned off its visibility. So if we look at the motion tab, there are several things we can adjust with the motion of a clip. We can adjust the position, the scale, the rotation, and a couple of other things down here. We'll start with the scale so we can have it zoom in and then zoom extra large. At the beginning of the clip, I'm going to slide the scale down so that it becomes very small. I'll go all the way down to 0, so it actually virtually disappears. But it hasn't actually disappeared, it's just very, very small. Then as I move my cursor along the line, I need to activate keyframes first of all for this motion. So this little stopwatch icon, I'll click on that. It'll turn blue and it'll add a keyframe for each of the motion items. And since it's at 0 scale, that's what it saves it at. I'll slide this down for a couple of seconds, and then I'll make the scale go back up to normal size. I can also just select it and type it in at 100%. So now when I made that change, it automatically added a keyframe there. So between these two, the program knows that it needs to calculate the scale from 0% up to 100%. If I slide it along, we can see how that changes. That's going backwards, and this is going forwards. If I want to then have another effect, maybe at the end have it zoom in really large out of screen, I'll slide my cursor down along here, and I'll say at this point I want to start making it bigger. So I'll add a keyframe here for scale, and then I'll slide it to the end and add another keyframe for scale. Actually, I'll just adjust, I'll go back one frame, which is right here. This will adjust one frame back, if I can see it. I'll adjust it larger at the size I want it to end up at. I'll just go the maximum size of 1200, and it adds a keyframe there. So now when I go back to the beginning of the video, it will zoom in. It'll hold there for the time specified. And then when it gets to the next keyframe, it'll start zooming larger. If I turn back on the opacity feature, I can now see it going where it starts to zoom in and fade in at the same time. It holds until it starts to zoom in larger to where it eventually fades out. That is using a title with some opacity effects and some zooming effects to work in Adobe Premiere Elements.